Hello, guys, and welcome to the Murder, She Wrote podcast, where I watch every episode of the hit 80s/90s show Murder, She Wrote. And I have all of the complete seasons on DVD. Thank God. With this epidemic going on, I hope everyone is safe. I'm not going to play the opening theme song because I heard that it hurts people's ears. Because I was recording it from my desktop on my laptop. I do my recording on my laptop because I don't have a microphone on my desktop, so I don't really have an entry or anything. In the last episode, I did a visual aid collage of snap screenshots from the episode. I'm not going to do that because that takes too much time. So in this episode, we're going to be discussing Season 1, Episode 4, Hooray for Homicide. Air date October 28th, 1984. Before we get started, I just want to say I hope you all are safe from this horrible illness that is going around, and I hope that things get better soon. I will be shelling out 2 episodes, this one and the next one. It's A Dog's Life. Season 1, Episode 4 is one of my favorites of Season 1 because of the guest stars, which I will talk about them at the end of the episode. So let's dive in. This episode starts with Jessica in her house in Cabot Cove. She is in the process of writing her book, and she's coming up with a way to kill her main character because she comes up behind a dummy and strangles him, but apparently that method is not good enough. Ethan is there. He's a Cabot Cove resident that was introduced in the first episode after the pilot movie, Deadly Lady, which you can listen to here on my channel of me talking about that episode. He's played by Clyde Atkins, and he's only in a handful of episodes. So he is there for this. I'm the only Cabot Cove resident in this episode, doing Jessica's plumbing, and she's trying to write a crucial chapter of her book. And she then gets a phone call from the town gossip, Agnes, who tells her that they're talking about her book being turned into a movie on television. She turns the television on in true cliche fashion. Of course, it's already tuned to the station where they're talking about it. And they talk about how much sex and violence is in the movie, and about Mr. Jerry Lydecker, the director that's known for doing a lot of raunchy pictures. Jessica's like, my goodness, that's not my book. That's not what I wrote. What are they doing? And Ethan goes, well, what are you going to do, Miss Fletcher? You're going to hop on a plane and go to LA and stop them from making the movie? And that's exactly what she does. Cut to stock footage of a plane landing, and I would assume is supposedly supposed to be LAX. Miss Fletcher goes to the office of Monty Steinberg, played by Lyle Ragnar, who's more of a guy that gets deals and doesn't break them. So he's not sure if he can help Mrs. Fletcher, but he will find somebody who will help her. But this is not good enough. And he tells her since this is her first visit to LA, she should go to Universal Studios or Disneyland or the Tar Pits. And she's like, I don't want to. I want to get this thing settled. And he's like, well, there's nothing I can do right now. My hands are tied. So she decides to go straight to the studio to go in to talk to Mr. Lydecker herself, played by John Saxton. She's outside the studio and she's telling the security guard, I'm the writer of The Corpse That Danced at Midnight, the movie they're making. And the security guard goes, lady, I don't care if you wrote Alice in Wonderland. If you're not on the list, you're not getting in. Just then, assistant costume designer Mary Ann, with a British accent, sees Jessica and says, "Put her down as my guest. She can come with me. Since she's the original author, I've been dying to meet her." Jessica gets into her car and they drive through the studio lot. We then cut to a trailer. We get introduced to the star of The Corpse Danced at Midnight, Eve Crystal, played by Melissa Sue Anderson, talking to Jerry Lydecker. Apparently, they are dating. And he is worried that she is dating her leading man, Scott, and he wants her all for himself. Eve's then asked to get on the set, and he leaves her trailer, and he runs into the original author, whose name I don't know because he doesn't show up for the rest of the episode, so it doesn't really matter. He says, "You cut out any line of dialogue that required any acting to get your little playmate on the screen." Jerry bans him from the lot and tells him that his screenplay was not good. Marianne gives Mrs. Fletcher a copy of the screenplay as they overhear this see this confrontation. Marianne introduces Mrs. Fletcher to Jerry, and Mrs. Fletcher says, "I would like to talk to you." And he says, "After lunch, this afternoon." "It's really important." "Yes," I said, "after lunch, this afternoon." And then he goes off with Marianne talking about costumes. Well, Mrs. Fletcher wanders around the set and finds herself on one of the sets where they're about to do a sex scene in a graveyard. Eve is like, "I don't get it. Why are they having sex in a cemetery? His friends just were butchered. Why does he want to have sex? He's grieving." And then the other guy goes, "So Scott, do you have any questions about the scene? We make love. What's there to know?" Typical guy response. So they're like, "Clear the set for the nude scene," and Miss Fletcher's like, "Oh Lord, what?" Cut to Mr. Lydecker's office. There's a huge poster of The Corpse Danced at Midnight with Eve in a band costume. I would have loved to have seen this movie. It's so interesting. Mr. Lydecker is not very nice to Jessica. She says, "If I recall, my main character was Arnold. He was a Boy Scout and he didn't have sex for 420 pages. And Mr. Lydecker's like, "Well, okay, so I changed a few things. Look, lady, you want me to tell you the truth? I'll tell you the truth. I bought your crummy book for the title. And the contract that you signed basically gives me license to do whatever I want to." "Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Lydecker. The fact that my name is attached to this movie and it's my book that you are dragging through the mud, I won't stop at nothing to stop this picture from being made." And Jessica leaves in a huff. She goes to her hotel room and she's looking the worse for wear. And there's a knock at the door. The guy from the office of Marty Steinberg comes and says, "Well, I'm sorry, Mrs. Fletcher," and he's from Welcome Back, Kotter. I'll find his name again, and that's a second guy from that show that's guest starred on Murder, She Wrote. And it turns out that the contract she signs gives anyone liberty when they buy any one of her books. So there's no way for her to stop the picture. But she decides to go back to the set to apologize to Mr. Lydecker for being rude, because Jessica Fletcher is awesome like that. So the next day she goes back to the set and Mr. Lydecker is not there. His secretary says that he's on the set and cannot be disturbed, and Mrs. Fletcher says, "Well, what I must do cannot be done over the telephone," because she says she can call him back or whatever. So when Mrs. Fletcher wanders back onto the set that she was on previously, the graveyard set, she finds Jerry dead. He'd been hit over the head with a heavy urn. Mrs. Fletcher flags down a security guard who calls the police, and they show up, and we get introduced to Lieutenant Hernandez, who is one of the detectives, who's one of the good detectives of season 1 that actually lets Jessica solve the crime instead of, being annoyed by her presence. When he's looking at the body, she comes around looking for a button that she had saw, but it was now gone. So when Marianne sees, and Ross Haley comes, he's the assistant director, comes and sees that Mr. Lydecker is dead. Ross is not all that upset about it. Marianne passes out because she's never seen a dead body before. And the one person that doesn't know that Jerry's dead is Eve. Now, something happens here that I just don't understand. Now, at this point in the episode, Eve has not been introduced to Mrs. Fletcher. Now, she's been working with all these people for about, I think the movie's been shooting for about 2 months or so. And they're like, who's going to tell Eve that Jerry's dead? She's going to be so upset because she is dating him after all. And Lieutenant Hernandez goes, well, I volunteer you, Mrs. Fletcher. You should go tell her. And none of the other people that she's been working with for years, not even leading man Scott, volunteers to go over there and tell her that Jerry's dead. It makes no sense why they would send a complete stranger to her to say, hey, your boyfriend's dead. But Miss Fletcher does it nonetheless. She shows up to Eve's house, and Eve is apparently drunk, and Mrs. Fletcher puts her under a spray of water to get her sober, and then tells her that Jerry's dead. She's visually upset, but as they say, the show must go on. The next day they're shooting. And unlike in Deadly Lady, where Mrs. Fletcher is sort of dragged into it by Sheriff Tupper and Ethan, and the second episode where she has to solve the case to get her niece's fiancé-to-be off of the suspect list, this one, she really doesn't have a reason to solve the crime. She doesn't really have a stake in his death. Basically, the movie continues, even though he's dead, because the assistant director, Ross Haley, takes over. So she has no stakes, and there's no one on the suspect list that she wants to take off. So this is kind of a weird filler episode, but I love it because it's a testament to what Hollywood was like back then, because in 1994, the majority of the movies that were released was horror films. And when Ross Haley is shooting a dance scene, he says, this movie is like Friday the 13th meets Flashdance, which is really... I want to see this movie that they were making, because that might be interesting. It's weird, but it's interesting. But that's a testament to the kind of movies that they were making around that time. So it really doesn't seem... I don't really understand why Mrs. Fletcher wants to solve this crime. Just because she's there, sure, we'll go with that motivation. So, Mrs. Fletcher goes and talks to the head costume designer, Eleanor, and Mrs. Fletcher, like I've said before, really knows how to read people, knows how to get down to the nitty-gritty, and gets them to open up to her. And she's like, oh, you have such beautiful costumes. And it's so sad that now that the film is going in a different direction, that all these other costumes are going to be discarded. And Eleanor says, oh, I know, I worked so hard on them. But she said maybe they'll use them in another movie. They often do. And that's true, they do. And Mrs. Fletcher says, there's one costume that I'm very interested in, and that is the band costume that Eve was supposed to wear, that she's wearing it on the poster. I thought that costume was really beautiful. Oh, it was, but she's not going to wear it now. You know what? That's the only one that's missing. So Mrs. Fletcher has a hunch that the costume could be in Eve's dressing room. But before that, she decides to go see the footage that Mr. Lydecker was looking at the day he died, which shows that Scott and Eve are having fun and kissing while the cameras are still rolling, even though they called cut on the scene for the movie. This confirms to Jerry that Eve is dating her leading man, Scott. Mrs. Fletcher has a hunch that the costume... First, Mrs. Fletcher is accused of being the murderer herself when the secretary repeats the things that she said earlier in the episode. I will stop at nothing to stop this picture from being made, and what I must do cannot be done over the telephone. Which, of course, would translate to murder. But she didn't do it, obviously. Mrs. Fletcher then has an epiphany and goes to Eve's trailer to find the band costume. There she finds Mr. I don't know why I keep calling him Jerry, Ross Haley, returning the button for the costume. He pushes her down and goes running away, but the cops just so happen to be there, and they arrest him, and everyone believes that he is the killer. The thing about this episode, I have to say, although it's my favorite because it's a testament to Hollywood at that time, and also because of Melissa Sue Anderson and John Saxon being in it, but honestly, there's not a lot of suspects. It's kind of straightforward of who is the killer. There's no twists and turns in this one, but I just really love it. But anyway, everyone believes that Mr. Haley is the killer, so they have this big, huge party at Eve's house wrapping things up because now there's no one to direct the movie, and there's been too much bad publicity with the movie, so they decided not to make it at all, which is fine by Mrs. Fletcher because her book is now being destroyed. Now, if her book ever does become a decent movie, I don't know. So, while at the party, everyone slowly leaves. Marianne says she refuses to say goodbye to Jessica because she's so happy that she became friends with her. Scott ends up leaving and saying that he has a job on a soap opera now. Eve has a job in another crummy movie similar to The Corpse That Danced at Midnight. And everyone ends up leaving except for Eve and Mrs. Fletcher. Eve demands to know what Miss Fletcher meant when she makes a toast and says that Jerry is innocent. Ross Haley is innocent. I don't know why I keep calling him Jerry. I'm so sorry. It's so hard to keep track of their names. Anyway, Eve is like, well, what do you mean? Ross was arrested. Yes, but he's not the killer. You see, you are, Eve. How it all comes together is this. Mrs. Fletcher realizes that when she told Eve that Jerry was dead, she was not really drunk. She was acting drunk because she's allergic to alcohol because she's a diabetic. Also, the reason why Ross was returning the button was to save his movie, not protecting Eve. The reason why Eve claims that she killed Jerry was because he was going to fire Scott off of the picture and replace him with another actor because they were dating. So, in a fit of rage and wanting to be free of his control, she picked up a heavy urn and hit him over the head with it, killing him instantly. And she ran for her life. And she faked drunk. Now, whether or not she goes to jail or what happens then, we don't know, because that's where it ends. And I love the performance from Melissa. Excuse me. I'm fumbling my words here, people. I love the performance by Melissa Sue Anderson. She is just so fantastic. And just so you know, Melissa Sue Anderson is known for being Mary Ingalls on Little House on the Prairie. She was in a transitional period because she had just left Little House on the Prairie a couple years prior to this, and she was trying to kind of shake away the image of being Mary Ingalls. She starred in one of my favorite cult classic horror films, Happy Birthday to Me, which is a really, really great movie that I love to watch from time to time. And she's one of my favorite actresses, and she really didn't get a chance to showcase much of her acting aside from being on Little House on the Prairie. When Mary Ingalls became blind, she was so convincing that abundance of people sent her letters telling her they were sorry because they really believed she was blind. And I always admired Little House on the Prairie for giving Mary Ingalls sort of a happy ending when she leaves the show. She goes off with her husband Adam. But in real life, Mary Ingalls didn't really have a husband or children. She was often sick and passed from family member to family member. She died in Carrie Ingalls' house all alone. A spinster, as they called them, which is so sad. See? Don't say you ever didn't learn anything on my show. Jerry Lydecker is played by John Saxton, who is known for playing various cop characters on various movies and shows. He starred in the original Black Christmas from 1976 as a cop, and then he starred in one of my all-time favorite horror films, A Nightmare on Elm Street, as both a cop and the father of Nancy. He also reprised his role in Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. Love that movie. And he will be in a handful of episodes of Murder, She Wrote as we go along. We also have Lyle Wagner that plays Marty Steinberg. He was on the Carol Burnett show for a long time, and he was hilarious, and he's a really good singer too. So it was nice to see him in this. And here are other guest stars. We have John Austin as Ross Haley, and he has the distinguished of being one of the few guest stars that guest stars as a regular person and then comes back as a resident of Cabot Cove in the form of a realtor agent. So he will be in a handful of episodes of Murder, She Wrote as we go along, and he has had an impressive career. He has been in over 157 different things, and he's still acting to this very day. He is known for being in The Frighteners, National Lampoon's European Vacation, Addams Family. I mean, he is really awesome. He really is. And he will be in a handful of episodes of Murder, She Wrote. Oh, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I just realized. The character that I was saying that was Marianne, her name was actually Martha, and she's known for being in Dr. Dolittle. She's been in over 104 different things in her career. Her last known credit is from 2012 in an Apocalypse movie. Oh, and she was in one of my favorite soap operas, All My Children, as Charlotte Devane. Awesome. And she was in Hercules as Hercules' mom, Helena. Herda. And this is her only episode for Murder, She Wrote. And she was played by Samantha Eggar. Morgan Stevens played Scott Bennett. He is known for being on the television show Fame, television show Murder 1, television show Murder A Year in the Life. He also was on Melrose Place as Nick Diamond, a leader of the mob in season 3. That is after, that is a member of Bobby Parisi's family. Not the best character. And he will be in 2 other episodes of Murder, She Wrote as we go along. He has been in 38 different things, and his last known credit is being on the Walker, Texas Ranger in 1999. And last but not least, let's see. That's it. Oh, and Lieutenant Mike Hernandez was played by Jose Perez. He's not been in a lot of things. He's only been in 38 different things, and his last known credit is a movie called The Way of the Gun, but it doesn't say what role he played. But he's known for The Mask of Zorro, from 1998, and this is his only episode of Murder, She Wrote that he ever did. But he was a good detective. I liked him. Now, the title of this episode was called Hooray for Homicide. And it's one of the weirdest titles. I don't understand it. I don't get it. I think Director of Death might be a better title. I'm not sure. But Hooray for Homicide just doesn't seem like it would be a good title. I mean, but I love this episode, and it is, like I said, a testament to Hollywood at the time, and has really great performances by John Saxon and Melissa Sue Anderson. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed listening to this, and I hope everyone stays safe during this horrible quarantine that we all have to be in. And I will be doing as many of these episodes as I possibly can do. I'll see you in the next one. Have a great day. That's the best I can do. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.